Welcome to MES Tech. I am Stan.
I'm Mac.
And this is something a little bit different. So we are still drinking, and we are still the hot mess of tech shows on the internet, but now we are talking about news. Whatever that might pertain to. Did you just belch all over the right-hand side of this place? Luckily, the window's open on this motherfucker. So, what we've got is we've got a list of topics that I can pull off my phone at pretty much any time, but we're going to be covering some of the more important things that we know about inside tech news.
Yes, news today.
News recently. Maybe not necessarily today when you see this, but pretty close, hopefully.
Oh, that's right. Delays.
I do have to edit this. This is not live. We're working towards getting live, but that might be a ways away.
Yeah, ways away. Okay, so what's first on the docket? We were talking about some stuff today, stuff that we thought might pertain or was interesting. So I think top was still RTX stuff, right?
Well, so let's just not dive into RTX.
Okay.
RTX is the horse that everybody is beating to death, and we just want to deliver that last blow once we actually get into there. So we'll hold off on that for just a second. The first thing that I've got on my list is Intel processor shortages might cause an increase in AMD's market share by like up to 30%.
Yes. So from what I understand, this is one of their manufacturers actually holding back production of chips to keep everything stable, like price-wise.
For Intel, I don't necessarily think that was the case.
Okay.
For a lot of the stuff that I took a look at, it was they were not developed enough to move to a 7-nanometer process.
Right.
And then their current yields on the 10...
They're focusing on the 10 and 14, right?
Well, yeah, so they're currently focusing on like their 12 and 14.
Okay. Right.
Because a lot of their smaller dies aren't yielding the silicon that they are hoping for. So instead of getting, like 85, 95% for every wafer, they're getting a lot less. And it's even worse when you get to the 7-nanometer.
They're just seeing a lot of bad batches, stuff that won't actually operate the way they want it to.
Yeah, so it's either a combination...
Intel, no, you have to do better than this.
It's a combination of suppliers and of various actual production pieces that are keeping Intel from developing and going to that next node of production. So 7-nanometer is really kind of like your holy grail at this point in time because AMD is currently on schedule to deliver 7-nanometer in late 2018, early 2019.
No.
So there's already leaked benchmarks out there that are suspected to be for the EPYC Rome processor, which is based on the 7-nanometer process for the Zen architecture. So that is
EPYC.
EPYC. EPYK, man.
So
EPYC server processor.
Yeah. Well, you've recently turned into the AMD guy, which is totally fine.
I wouldn't necessarily say recently. I've always said AMD stuff because it was inexpensive. You would get a lot of value. It was up until the end. If we're talking the transition from Athlon X2 into the the Phenoms, the Athlon X4s, the 965s, and then into the FX processors, when I really abandoned any PC stuff because I was on a Mac, and a Mac was using an Intel chip, so I didn't really have any choice for that. But I was always an AMD guy simply because it offered me a lot of performance for value, and at that point in time, they were really competitive. So I got out of them about the same time that Intel started coming out with Duos, i5s, i7s, and they were like lightning.
Right. I got into computers a couple years before they started coming out with the Duos processors, and I went Intel simply because it was that edge in performance, and that's at the time what me and my father wanted to do. Once they started coming out with the Duos, it was all about overclocking, get the best of the best, and so what if you have to spend an extra $100? It was worth it to have, the biggest.
The biggest, the best, the baddest.
Yes. But now it's just, they're falling by the wayside again, and I just don't understand. It's been so long of being on top, and now they're falling, I feel like they're falling down again.
But they're not. Because the 9000 series is coming.
I know, but yes, they're still, 9000 series, you're looking at incredible clocks per cycle, incredible
So you're increasing your cores, you're increasing your hyperthreading. The difference is, I think, the 9700 is going to be an 8-core 8-thread, so they're not hyperthreading the actual 9700K. Going to the 9900K is going to get you that 8-core 16-thread performance, which another leaked benchmark has it clocked up to 5 gigahertz, which is absolutely insane compared to like a Ryzen 2700X or an unreleased 2800X, which might touch 4.2, like maybe 4.3.
With the proper...
Yeah, with the proper tweaking and, like a massage from the right guy, that might be the maximum for that. So the overclocked 9900K looks to be an absolute fucking barn burner. But what price point is it going to be at?
Right. I mean, if it's anything like Intel's past, and it's the flagship best of the best, you're looking at a processor that's going to be $400+, maybe $600+. Technical difficulties, I have no idea where we stop.
I don't know how we could actually do live stuff with this particular camera. The only thing that I know is that it's possible because we could just output from the HDMI that goes to the actual monitor and not record with it. So it'll probably never turn off if it's not trying to record something. But to kind of jump in where we were talking about where your dollar per performance value was coming with Intel.
Yes.
Because we were talking, if it's a flagship 9900K, you're probably looking $400, $500, $600, depending on the setup. Plus, you're also going to have to get the latest Z390 chipset
to take advantage of anything like that.
Exactly. So they've just started releasing Z390 boards, which are probably meant for that 9th generation.
You're talking another $300 or $400 in board.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's like, okay, so I can go get right now a Ryzen 2700X for $320.
Right.
And that's a 8-core 16-thread machine. It's overclockable to 4.2 gigahertz on all cores with proper cooling. 4 gigahertz is pretty normal. Mm-hmm. If you got an average chip, if you got a below average chip, you're 3.9 or up to 4.2 because boost is still kicking in there. You can get a board for like $70 that's decent for an X370. You can get an X470 for about $100. You can go real high dollar and you can get a Crosshair, Crosshair 7 X470, and that board is like $220 for the Hero, $250 depending on whether you get Wi-Fi and what you're getting for sales and rebates. So for $500, you have the best possible motherboard for that socket, which is good for the next 2 years because they guaranteed AM4 until 2020.
Right, and Intel's not doing that. Intel's doing 1151 right now.
Yep.
And then...
Yeah, we don't necessarily know because they change chipsets every 2 generations.
Right.
So you were good with Z170, you're good with Z270 if you had an overclockable chip, but now all of a sudden you're in 370 for anything 8th generation, probably 390 for anything 9th generation. So they're giving you the hardware tax to get that extra performance.
Right. I mean, I'm loving my 4790K right now, but at the same time, when that was around, there still wasn't... That was still before any of the Ryzens came out.
Oh yeah, by a lot.
Right.
That was still like a really serious FX based era, which was a totally different run of performance.
Oh yeah, and so when I had my first put together my Intel gaming PC, it was the best of the best, and I loved it. But now looking at spending another $1,000, which I totally get for the best of the best, I don't know.
Well, how much of a difference are you going to get outside of multi-threaded performance, like multi-core tasks? How much benefit are you going to get moving from your 4790K to an 8700K or to an 8086K,
right,
which you were looking at?
Because, I mean, right now I have mine overclocked to 4.6, 4.7 stably, and I'm running at good temps, stuff that I'm happy with. So why would I move up to that new platform? What is Intel going to come out with, other than the fact that 5 looks really, really cool? And I really want it. I want it so badly.
The 5G.
I want it so badly. But I don't know if it's worth it. And that's what kind of bugs me. Because AMD's, they're going the other route. They're like, 4 is okay.
Well, yeah,
we're just going to do
thread. Exactly. The Threadripper is a perfect example. The latest 2990WX, that's 32 cores, 64 threads. If you move to 7 nanometer, that means that on the AM4 die, you're probably going to be seeing 16 cores, 32 threads. Worst case scenario, you're getting like 12 cores, 24 threads,
right,
like a double of a Ryzen 2600, which is going to give you somewhere in the neighborhood of like a 2000 or a 2200, 2400 Cinebench score on your multi-threaded tasks. It's going to be absolutely bonkers what they're going to be able to do on a consumer-based chipset.
Right, and then you're talking about Intel, where Xeon is ludicrously expensive, and then also on a completely different platform.
Oh, yeah.
So...
Totally different socket and everything.
Yeah.
So the reason they're going to be gaining market share is because it looks like companies like HP and Dell and other companies that used to carry a lot of Intel because of the shortages, but also because of the changes in performance, they're going to be doing a lot of forward orders so that way they're going to have more AMD-based CPUs. So their lineup is going to be more diverse as far as chips are concerned because AMD brought something to the table that is worthwhile.
And they can supply.
Yeah, they can supply. And their 7nm process, again, is on schedule to do full release in 2019 for both server-side and consumer-based 7nm chips.
Right, which could lead the way for even mobile devices where stuff starts moving over to that platform as well.
Yep.
Intel fanboys. Let's band together.
In the comments. Band together in the comments. What do you guys think about the current situation with Intel and how they're kind of going to lose market share, or will they lose market share? Do they have enough brand name recognition to see that through this kind of like shortage of supply? But moving on to the next thing, let's talk RTX.
Okay, awesome. So, biggest thing that bummed me out with RTX is Battlefield 5 announced that limited.
Yeah, they gimped the RTX capabilities of Battlefield 5. So this is after we made our previous video where that was one of the things that we were really excited about was Battlefield 5 using RTX. But not only that, they also delayed Battlefield 5, so it's not coming out until November. So it's released late. We also have other games that were supposed to release with RTX, like Shadow of the Tomb Raider. It did not ship day one with RTX. That's going to be patched into it.
Little skeptical.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a big thing to just patch into a game.
Well, based on what I've been hearing and what I've been reading, it looks like RTX is not necessarily, it's not difficult to implement. It takes the place of a lot of different rendering things. So if you've got a lot of global illumination, say that we wanted to illuminate this scene, we have one giant overall light and then we have spotlights that are going to cast proper shadows to make it look like actual light. Whereas with RTX, essentially you don't need all that extra stuff. You just have your primary lights, and then the ray tracing bounces it off and creates those realistic shadows, and they're more realistic than what it would currently be. We actually just watched the Time Spy ray tracing demo, which was insane. It was so good.
Mind-blowing.
Like the reflections and how everything kind of created this very immersive environment. You could see the gloss, the wet reflection on the marble of the floor, and anytime that anything changed in real time, it was reflected in the screen. It just blew me away, and I can't wait to like have a ray tracing card. When hell freezes over or my bank account grows to an exorbitant amount.
Those are so expensive still.
Yeah, and that's where we get into the release of RTX. First off, the RTX 2080 Ti, that was delayed by a week for its release, so we're probably going to run into supply issues on that. Yep. Most of your aftermarket board partners already have that, and most of their early orders, their early run, has already been pre-ordered out.
Yeah, so you can't go online and click a button. You can't go in the store and say I want this on a shelf someday. Well, I guess you could, but
maybe you could go to like Best Buy.
Yeah,
or
you're
something
talking
like
months at this point.
So you could probably go to like Best Buy. You can go to like Nvidia's website and you can order a Founders Edition, but depending on what version you wanted, they are very limited in their availability. And then on top of that, their pricing is ridiculous because we went over to like video cards and we've taken a look at like Jay's 2 Cents and Linus and all that kind of stuff, and everybody has done their own benchmarks and they're all very consistent across the board. And the big theme is that what we were expecting is that the 1080 Ti to the RTX 2080, you're going to see a 10 to 15% increase in performance from the 1080 Ti to the RTX 2080, because that is a very generational increase. When the 980 Ti came out and then it turned into the 1080, you saw a 15 to 20% bump in FPS across the board, in general performance. Mm-hmm. So that was the replacement, and then a year later the Ti came out. Because they're releasing the Ti early, the Ti is essentially taking the place of the Titan. So the gap for the Titan is going to be much larger, but we don't see that kind of difference until we get into just 4K.
Right. As far as 1080p stuff, you're really running into CPU bottlenecks before anything else.
Exactly. And 60% of all people playing on Steam are using 1080p as their default resolution. So for the vast majority of gamers out there, you are going to see no benefit in running RTX versus a GTX 1080 or 1080 Ti. The difference is just not there.
I mean, as somebody that just went out and spent I didn't need a new television or monitor. I bought a new television that I use as my monitor, 4K TV. I love it to pieces, but at the same time, I'm getting, 60, slightly better than that FPS, but if you wanted a 60 frame per second or 60 hertz 4K TV or 120 hertz 4K TV,
which isn't really 120 hertz anyway.
No.
It's 120 hertz interpolation, which means that it's creating individual frames based on the previous frame and the next frame, so that way it's kind of thinking that it's putting it in there. It's not actually 120 hertz.
The internet lied to me.
I don't know what the internet does if it doesn't lie to people.
But if you want a true 120 hertz television, you are going to pay through the nose for it, and that's where you'd see the benefit of one of these big cards right now.
Absolutely. High frame rate 4K gaming is something that is just price point way too far away for the average consumer.
Intel being out of the realm of possibility. Yeah.
Because if you're talking about your average resolutions, you're getting 20%, 25% increase in performance, 1080 Ti to a 2080 Ti, and that's in current games, and there's not even enough RTX content out there to even... You can't even demo fucking RTX, man. Like,
right.
Final Fantasy 15 demo with RTX, that's one of the only things, and that's limited to the press right now, so very few people have access to that, and there's not enough content to really test or even utilize the RTX technology. So you're talking, you are early adopting for content that might be coming out in 6 months. And then the benefit that you're getting right now in the content that you already own, if you don't have a 4K monitor, then you are not seeing the same kind of benefit as you are the same increase in price. If you have the budget for a 1080 Ti, which you can get used for $500, sometimes less, sometimes a little bit more, you can get brand new for somewhere between $650 and $780, depending on the one that you're looking at.
Right.
You can get a 2080 Ti next week for $1,200 to $1,300. What kind of bullshit is that?
It's twice as much money, man. It, like you said, it's taking over the place, or it's a placeholder for the Titan at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what it is.
Yeah.
So it seems like they're trying to remove it from the lineup altogether. Don't know if that's actually going to happen, but...
Well, the Titan, they've been saying for a little while, since the Titan V came out, that...
Oh, you hit the button.
I did hit the button.
Oh my god.
Just because we have to cut this up into like 4 sections because the camera shuts off after 12 minutes doesn't mean that I don't hit the button. I don't have to let you know when it's going to happen.
I'm talking about boats. You're talking about computer things. We're on camera. I don't know what's going on.
On topic. All right.
Yes.
So
what, RTX?
In short,
Yes.
RTX 2080 Ti. I can see if you have the option between the 1080 Ti and the RTX 2080, they are within 5 to 7% in performance over every single benchmark and metric. Sometimes underperforming the Ti, sometimes overperforming the Ti, but you do get the RTX technology in the 2080. If you can justify that extra $100 to $200 to get the RTX 2080, to get that ray tracing, to get that sweet, sweet goodness that is the reflections that aren't available yet, go for it. Like, that is a justifiable exchange. But to go to the 2080 Ti to not get that much performance gain, I just don't see it.
Not right now. Not with it as expensive as it is. See, the problem is, if it comes out, if a lot of games come out with ray tracing and you see a bunch of these cards going for now more money because there's a supply and demand shift, we are the fools. But I don't see that happening. I really don't.
Well, yeah, the mining craze is going down. So anybody that had a lot of cards that were set up for mining, those are going to hit the market. They're not worth nearly as much, especially since Bitcoin and Ethereum and all that shit is going down the toilet comparatively. You know, what it was for a high last year, hitting $20,000 per Bitcoin, now it's down to like $5,000. Ethereum...
You were completely correct, but you're going to get so much shit for saying that. You know that.
Well, I'm not going to get shit for that because I told Joe, the guy that we work with, who was heavy into fucking cryptocurrency, I was just like, if you're going to get into it, get out now. If you've already been in it, get out now because the bubble is going to burst. It's not going to be any kind of value similar to what you're seeing because people don't understand what they're doing with cryptocurrency. They don't understand the mechanism of cryptocurrency and what it's really used for. And it's not widely accepted. You started seeing like credit card companies saying, no, you can't buy anything, can't buy crypto with our credit cards. Countries were starting to ban mining and stuff like that. The transactions were not being allowed. So as soon as the general populace found out about cryptocurrency, big boom. And at that point in time, you sell all your shit and then you buy back in low. Because crypto long-term, sure, crypto long-term is a good buy. If you could get into a couple Bitcoins and, you mine over time, that's not necessarily bad as long as you're not looking for the instantaneous return. Because the instantaneous return, man, that almost never works out for people. But I digress to copy Jay's 2 cents. So, crypto mining, going down, that's going to allow you to get a cheaper 1080 Ti, but just make sure that you're aware of how long it's been running and what it's been running at, because they just run hot all the time when they're in a mining rig. So it's not necessarily a great place to get them, but it's going to drive down the overall price of the GTX 1080, GTX 1080 Ti. 1080 is still a viable option too. 1070 Ti is still a viable option. If you're looking at a game in 4K or less and you want to get 60 frames per second or more, 1080 Ti, 1080 Ti being the best. Still, very good options for your average consumer.
1080, hello, 4K.
Yeah.
Runs awesome.
I've got a 1440p 144 Hz monitor, and fucking Doom is the balls on it. It's amazing. I can get 120, 130, 140 frames per second on that 144 Hz monitor like nobody's business, and it is the smoothest gaming experience I've ever had. So, I'm firmly in the GTX 1080 camp. Maybe SLI.
I know it's not a lot of fun.
I know it's not worth the money, but it might be worth the money.
Yeah.
So after that, we kind of covered the lack of content for RTX. So
yep.
On the other side of the fence, instead of PCs, let's talk about Apple.
Apple.
So what are we going to talk about for Apple?
What are we talking about for Apple?
We're talking about Mojave.
Mojave.
Yeah.
See, this is how much okay, I know nothing. Yeah. This is the Apple guy. So Mojave, apparently, it's the new one that's coming out, and this year. Apparently, they do it every year.
Like every year, every 2 years. Like the last one was High Sierra, which came out probably about 9 months to a year ago. But Mojave's coming out, and that's with the release of the new MacBook Pros and iMac Pros and stuff like that are allowing it to utilize more RAM and be more effective and more efficient in its process.
Okay.
But the feature set doesn't really scream, yay!
Oh, that's right. Because the only really good thing that I saw, the time of day shift for the background.
Yeah, which is ridiculous but cool at the same time. So Apple, I hate to say this, but I think that Apple in general has been on a downward trend in terms of innovation and creating value inside their products outside of their just namesake for quite some time. So as soon as Steve Jobs left that position and Tim Cook, or I think that's what his name is, but as soon as he came into the
proven.
As soon as he came into the CEO role, the actual development of Apple products in a way that was going to advance culture or advance society has just really gone down the hill. It's not necessarily there, and their iPhones are another choice. They're another thing. The iPhone XR. Like the iPhone XR, with the cool colors and stuff like that, $750 phone has the same resolution as an iPhone 4. Like its screen has the same pixel density as an iPhone 4, a phone from fucking 5 years ago. So there's no advancement to a 1080p display. You can't watch high definition content on Netflix on your XR if you get that iPhone. So they're driving you into a higher price point phone like an XS, an XS Max, or whatever the hell they're going to be calling it. So Apple, I'm sorry, I just can't stand behind you guys anymore. You have the ability to make great products. You kind of shit on your professionals a little while ago, and now your consumer base is really just based around your culture that you created, and it's not nearly as thriving as it once was in my eyes as we record this on my iMac.
I appreciate. You were talking about their mobile devices. I appreciate particularly the SE model for the iPhone 6, 5, something. This thing, it's small, it's durable. The user interface has always been my favorite with Macs.
It's super easy.
It's super easy to use. Other than that, though, it's the same fucking thing to me. and you know it's for $1,000 for a phone. Doesn't make sense.
Yeah. But we weren't talking about that. We're talking about Mojave. We got off on a tangent. So Mojave has this dark mode, which is going to give you kind of an enhanced perspective on the workflow that you're doing. It's going to be good in creative stuff. There's some renovations to Finder, which is going to allow you to get all the metadata and take a look at some things. You can live work on documents while you're just previewing them in Finder. So it's giving a bit more robustness to the file, the file stack. A better sorting option. So as far as efficiency of use, it should be a big benefit, but I don't see the big benefit in Mojave itself. But you kind of get forced into the upgrades for that in general.
Which is the way Windows 10 is going anyway. So
yeah,
that's
Apple really helped pioneer that. You're going to be on OS 10 forever.
Congratulations.
Yep.
Cool. That about does that, I think.
Yeah, no, I don't think we need to really talk about Apple like much more ever again. So one thing that we both might be falling prey to, though, is Newegg.
Oh, no.
So if you guys haven't heard about this, which I'm sure that you've already heard about this, but Newegg has been the victim of a hack from this hacker organization in the UK or Europe called MageCart, which has essentially collected credit card information for any new credit card entered from the period of like August 14th to September 18th. And I know that I made at least one transaction with a credit card during that time, so I'm still waiting on my notification, and I've got my fingers on the trigger to get a new card and cancel the previous one and just do whatever I've got to do to avoid any kind of fraudulent charges. But if you guys aren't aware of this, it's definitely something that you guys should look into and make sure that you're monitoring your credit card history and purchases, and passwords, anything associated with that, and your Newegg account.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I don't know if I made a purchase during that time frame. I know I'm on Newegg all the time, checking shit out, and possibly making a small purchase here or there. I may have bought some extra SATA cables at one point. So it's little stuff like that. $3 purchase, and now they have your stuff, and just keep an eye on your accounts, everybody. Make sure that you're safe. I've already had to replace my card once this year.
Yeah.
Lots of fun.
The more concerning thing is that this was a script that was embedded on Newegg's server itself. So that means that they hacked into and then had access, like they were a programmer, to Newegg's protocol so that way they could reroute credit card information to a domain that they bought and set up themselves.
Yeah.
That looked similar enough so that way it didn't really raise a lot of red flags. So it's just a whole new level of awareness. I started setting up two-step verification on a lot of my accounts so that way nobody can get access to them unless they are me and they have my cell phone. So that's another thing that's, I've got to keep secure. But we want to let you guys know because we know that it could possibly affect us. And if it could affect us, it could affect anybody.
Yeah. Awesome.
And then the next thing would be we've been talking about RTX.
Okay.
And we've been talking about RTX for like a couple weeks.
Yes.
At this point in time. Like everybody else. Everybody's been talking about RTX. What is AMD doing? With their graphics cards.
Falling behind. I don't know. AMD, I had a couple of AMD cards over the years, and I loved them to pieces. They ran hot.
Were they AMD cards or were they ATI cards?
ATI cards.
So that was before AMD bought ATI.
Yeah.
I did too. I had ATI cards before AMD bought ATI.
In what year was that?
So that was like the early 2000s? Like early to mid 2000s.
Okay. So I may have had both ATI cards and AMD cards then. No, I did. I had an AMD Radeon. Oh god. 4870 times 2. That thing was one of my favorite cards ever. It played Crysis 2 at 40 frames a second. Max everything.
Which is dope. Back in the day, that was
awesome.
the thing. So,
well, only limited by my CPU. But
the big question I have, though, is what are they doing with their current crop of graphics cards? To return to our... we now return to our broadcast day. So, we were talking about AMD. And AMD's lack of response and really AMD's lack of drive towards the higher end of graphics card market because we haven't seen any kind of announcement, any kind of retort to the whole RTX thing that Nvidia has going for them, it might be a good move because there's not a lot of good press around RTX right now. It's a really cool technology, but nobody's seeing the benefit.
As we just proved.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah. And right now, you're talking about a couple of cards that... the Fury and below, they're aimed at 1060s. 1060 Ti's and below.
Well, the fastest AMD card that isn't a Vega 64 or 56...
Which are technically workstation cards, right?
Well, they're like a hybrid card. They were meant to be a really good gaming card, but then they found out that they're really good for mining and compute. So it was... They tried to market them in very different ways, so it's just a whole big clusterfuck of what Vega is. But they do help in like GPU-assisted rendering, which is why Vega is currently in the next generation of iMac Pros and all that kind of stuff. It's a really weird situation for AMD and what they're doing with their current crop of cards. Because the last cards they released before Vega, the RX 480, the RX 580, those cards are directly targeted at something like a GTX 1060.
Right.
Their price point and their performance is right in line with a 1060. Not even a 1070. Like, maybe a 1070, definitely not a 1070 Ti, but like somewhere in that 1060, 1070 price range and performance range.
Which is... and they handle operations a little bit differently. So, depending on what program you're running or what game you're running, they'll handle things a little bit differently, different frame rates. But for the top-of-the-line card through AMD, it breaks my heart.
Yeah, it's... I would love to see more competition. Right. And hopefully what we're seeing is with AMD being a little bit more quiet when it comes to how they're moving forward with like Navi, because they've currently got the Polaris architecture on the RX 580s, and then they've got Vega and stuff like that. But their next generation is supposed to be Navi, and Navi is supposed to be 7nm graphics card.
Wow.
So if they're moving forward with 7nm desktop, there's no reason they shouldn't have a 7nm graphics card. And if, depending on the sourcing for memory, because they were doing like...
Excuse you.
That was rough.
Safety juice. Alright, so depending on the sourcing of where these AMD cards are coming from, and they're getting
they did HBM memory.
Okay.
So like high bandwidth memory instead of DDR.
Interesting.
Yeah, so instead of doing GDDR6 or GDDR5X or GDDR5, they did HBM2 for the Vega cards and for some of their other cards. So that was just a completely different process for their memory. And then now that Nvidia has stepped up to GDDR6, are they going to kind of try to feed off that foundry for the GDDR6, or are they going to just use a larger amount of GDDR5, DDR5X, which is more readily available, and then use the overhead to help a more multi-threaded processor in a 7nm Navi?
Which is kind of what they're doing with their desktop processors.
Well, yeah, so instead of doing faster core clocks, they're doing more cores, more threads.
Right. Higher bandwidth memory, so you're supporting more desktop memory. I could really see them going that way, just to... Intel's branching one way, Intel and Nvidia.
Mm-hmm.
Then AMD's branching another way. So, which... I like the competition that these guys have and used to have, where it breeds success and,
It's better for the consumer.
Right. Value for the customer, as well as, we get better stuff quicker because they want to produce the next best thing, which is cool. So if they do end up splitting up and going separate ways, different idea routes, that's totally fine, but at the same time, yeah.
They still need to implement ray tracing, because ray tracing is being billed as the next big thing by Nvidia.
It looks absolutely phenomenal.
And that is something that is there's an API built in DirectX 12. That's why the TimeSpy demo, which has worked with AMD, Intel, Nvidia, any partners,
way back,
and any partners, they've all been working on this to develop for that particular benchmark, that particular API, that version of DirectX. They have to come out with something that's ray tracing based. So if they could go with the same setup that Nvidia has and have two dedicated core setups, because Nvidia went to a gigantic die, like the thing's fucking huge, and what you've got is you've got your Turing architecture on one, and then you've got your CUDA cores and your standard like whatever TU104 architecture is on the rest of the die. So that you could go that kind of route and have two different setups that are utilized in different manners. It It's just that you don't know. We don't know. Nobody knows what AMD's plan, other than AMD, is for their graphics card lineup. Are they going to be able to reintroduce any kind of competition into the market, or are they just going to let Nvidia write the future of graphics cards for the next 5 years, like they have been for the last 5 years?
Yeah.
That's really the real big takeaway from this. Their silence might be a good thing if they're working on something particularly fantastic.
Something big, yeah, that would be really cool.
Especially coming in with no ray tracing support for any of the RTX stuff, with less than stellar reviews for performance compared to previous generational increases. It's a great opportunity for them to be like, all right, we're going to go full force into this, and then we're going to come up with something that's real gangbusters that can help deliver that kind of performance increase that a lot of people are looking for. Or...
Don't say it.
They could just do nothing.
Don't say it. Yeah, because they produce really good cards at great value, like you said. I'd like to see them a little bit less expensive, because I feel like Intel fanboy. So, yes, you can pay a little bit more for the biggest best, but they have always been great at providing that value for our money.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe not the best, but it's there. So, and also their number crunching hotness.
Yes, they're pretty spectacular.
Yeah,
but that's all of the topics that we really wanted to cover. So what we want you guys to do is hit us up in the comments down below. So if you have any kind of insight, if you have any kind of feelings or things like that, the stuff that you want to talk about inside the comments, make sure you comment down there so that way we can start that conversation and get those creative juices flowing. Figure out what we need to talk about next time that we do one of these videos. Hopefully next week.
Yeah, that would be a lot of fun.
That would be pretty cool. So knowing a little bit more about what we actually want to do with this is going to be a really big deal. But as always, if you like the video, hit the thumbs up. If you didn't like the video, you can hit the thumbs down. But as always, give us a little bit of feedback. And if you like the content, hit subscribe to get more of it, which is going to be coming out on a much more regular basis. We do a lot of different stuff, and we're looking to add in reviews of different things. We got a couple long-term tests that we're doing, a couple new computer builds, and a lot of different stuff that fits into a very budget-oriented, fun kind of category for computers.
Which is cool, because neither of us are rich.
Yeah. Ain't that the truth? And maybe we'll do some gaming.
Ooh.
Were you gonna axe me out of this? We're gonna be like, cut, it's like clapboard out.
No, I was totally not gonna